Whispers in the Woods, Chapter 1. The Discovery. I've always been an avid hiker, finding solace in the quiet embrace of nature. The dense forests and winding trails offered an escape from the mundane routine of daily life. One autumn afternoon, I decided to explore a less traveled path in the heart of the Wallowwoods. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under my boots as I ventured deeper into the forest. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Its wooden structure was weathered and covered in moss, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a closer look. Pushing open the creaky door, I was greeted by a musty smell that hinted at years of neglect. The interior was sparse, with only a few pieces of broken furniture scattered around. But what caught my eye was a large, dusty book lying on a rickety table in the center of the room. The cover was made of worn leather, and strange symbols were etched into it. I hesitated for a moment before picking it up. The book felt unnaturally cold in my hands, sending a shiver down my spine. As I opened it, I realized it was filled with handwritten notes and sketches detailing various supernatural occurrences and rituals. The more I read, the more I felt an inexplicable sense of dread. Chapter 2. The Haunting Begins. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The book's contents haunted my thoughts, and I found myself unable to sleep. Around midnight, I heard a faint whispering sound coming from the direction of the cabin. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the whispers grew louder and more distinct. Against my better judgment, I grabbed a flashlight and headed back to the cabin. The forest was eerily silent, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. As I approached the cabin, the whispers intensified, now sounding like a chorus of voices speaking in an ancient, forgotten language. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with an oppressive energy. The book lay open on the table, its pages fluttering as if moved by an unseen hand. I felt a cold breeze brush past me, and the whispers seemed to be coming from all around. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was not alone. Chapter 3. The Entity. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. Panic set in as I fumbled with the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature in the room dropped, and I could see my breath forming in the air. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form barely visible in the dim light. It moved towards me with an unnatural grace, and I could feel its malevolent presence. The figure reached out a hand, and I felt a cold, clammy grip on my arm. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The entity whispered in my ear, its voice a chilling blend of anger and sorrow. It spoke of ancient curses and forgotten rituals, of souls trapped in eternal torment. I realized that the book was not just a collection of stories, but a gateway to something far more sinister. Whispers in the Woods. Chapter 4. The Escape. With the entity's grip tightening on my arm, I mustered all my strength and yanked myself free. I stumbled backward, knocking over the table and sending the book crashing to the floor. The entity let out a guttural growl, and the room seemed to vibrate with its anger. Desperation fueled my actions as I grabbed the book and hurled it into the fireplace. Flames engulfed the pages, and the entity let out a piercing scream that echoed through the cabin. The door flew open, and I didn't waste a second. I bolted out of the cabin and into the night, not daring to look back. The forest was a blur as I ran, branches scratching at my face and arms. The whispers followed me, growing fainter with each step until they finally faded into silence. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the woods, where the first light of dawn was breaking through the trees. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. Back in the safety of my home, I tried to make sense of what had happened. The book was gone, reduced to ashes, but the memories of that night lingered like a dark cloud over my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the entity was still out there, watching and waiting. Days turned into weeks, and I began to notice strange occurrences around my house. Objects would move on their own, and I would hear faint whispers in the dead of night. Sleep became a distant memory as the haunting presence grew stronger. One evening, as I was sifting through old photographs, I found a picture of the cabin. It was taken years ago, long before it had fallen into disrepair. In the background, I could see a shadowy figure standing by the window, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. My heart raced as I realized that the entity had been there all along, waiting for someone to find the book. Chapter 6. The Return. Determined to put an end to the haunting, I decided to return to the cabin. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of resolve, I ventured back into the woods. The forest seemed darker and more foreboding than before, and the whispers began as soon as I crossed the threshold. The cabin stood as I had left it, a silent sentinel in the heart of the woods. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the air thick with an oppressive energy. The fireplace was cold, and the ashes of the book lay undisturbed. As I searched the cabin, I found a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a collection of old journals and artifacts, each one more disturbing than the last. The journals detailed the history of the cabin and the entity that haunted it, revealing a dark and twisted tale of betrayal and revenge. Chapter 7. The Ritual. Among the artifacts, I found a set of instructions for a ritual to banish the entity. It required a series of complex steps and rare ingredients, but I was determined to see it through. Over the next few days, I gathered everything I needed and prepared for the ritual. On the night of the full moon, I returned to the cabin and began the ritual. The air was thick with tension as I chanted the ancient words, and the temperature dropped sharply. The entity appeared, its form more defined and menacing than before. As I completed the final step of the ritual, a blinding light filled the cabin, and the entity let out a final, anguished scream. The light faded, and the oppressive energy lifted, leaving the cabin eerily silent. I knew that the entity was gone, banished to whatever dark realm it had come from. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. With the entity gone, the haunting presence in my home disappeared. I was finally able to sleep peacefully, free from the whispers and the shadows. The cabin remained abandoned, a silent reminder of the horrors that had transpired. But even now, I can't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The woods are still there, and who knows what other dark secrets they hold. As I write this, I can hear the faintest whisper on the wind, a reminder that some things are never truly gone. Whispers in the Woods. Chapter 9. The New Guardian. Months passed since the ritual, and life slowly returned to normal. However, the experience left me with a sense of responsibility. I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin and its dark history needed to be guarded. I decided to become the new guardian of the woods, ensuring that no one else would fall victim to the entity's curse. I began researching the history of the cabin and the surrounding area, uncovering stories of other hikers who had disappeared or gone mad after encountering the entity. It became clear that the entity had been preying on the curious and the unsuspecting for centuries. Chapter 10. The Warning. One evening, as I was patrolling the woods, I encountered a group of teenagers who had heard rumors about the haunted cabin and decided to investigate. I warned them about the dangers and shared my own harrowing experience. They seemed skeptical at first, but the fear in my eyes convinced them to leave. As they walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the entity's influence was still present. The whispers had stopped, but the woods felt different, as if they were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Chapter 11. The Return of the Book. One stormy night, I was awakened by a loud crash. I rushed outside to find the cabin's door wide open and the interior in disarray. The ashes of the book were scattered across the floor, and in their place was a new pristine copy of the ancient tome. My heart sank as I realized that the entity had found a way to return. The book was open to a page detailing a ritual to summon the entity, and I knew that someone had performed it, either out of curiosity or malice. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. Determined to put an end to the entity once and for all, I gathered the necessary ingredients for a counter-ritual. This time, I enlisted the help of a local historian who specialized in ancient texts and rituals. Together, we prepared for the confrontation. On the night of the new moon, we returned to the cabin. The air was thick with tension, and the whispers had returned, louder and more insistent than ever. As we began the ritual, the entity appeared, its form more menacing and powerful than before. The historian chanted the ancient words, and I followed his lead, focusing all my energy on the ritual. The entity fought back, its presence overwhelming and suffocating. But we pressed on, determined to banish it once and for all. Chapter 13. The Final Battle. The cabin shook as the ritual reached its climax. The entity let out a deafening roar, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows danced around us, and the whispers grew to a cacophony of voices. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and I knew that the entity was trying to break my resolve. With a final desperate effort, we completed the ritual. A blinding light filled the cabin, and the entity let out a final, anguished scream. The light faded, and the oppressive energy lifted, leaving the cabin eerily silent once more. Chapter 14. The Aftermath. The historian and I stood in the cabin, exhausted but victorious. The entity was gone, banished to whatever dark realm it had come from. The book lay on the floor, its pages blank and devoid of any power. We decided to bury the book deep in the woods, ensuring that it would never be found again. As we covered it with earth, I felt a sense of closure. The entity was gone, and the woods were finally at peace. Chapter 15. The Legacy. Years passed, and the story of the haunted cabin became a local legend. People would tell tales of the entity and the brave souls who had banished it. The cabin remained abandoned, a silent reminder of the horrors that had transpired. I continued to guard the woods, ensuring that no one else would fall victim to the entity's curse. The whispers had stopped, and the woods felt alive and vibrant once more. But even now, I can't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The woods are still there, and who knows what other dark secrets they hold. As I write this, I can hear the faintest whisper on the wind, a reminder that some things are never truly gone. Whispers in the Woods. Chapter 16. The New Threat. Years had passed since the entity was banished, and the woods had returned to their serene state. However, one fateful night, I received a frantic call from the historian. He had been researching the origins of the entity and discovered something alarming. There were whispers of a new threat, an even darker force that had been awakened by our previous rituals. The historian explained that the entity we had banished was merely a guardian, a lesser spirit protecting something far more sinister. The true source of the darkness was an ancient relic buried deep within the woods, and it was now stirring. Chapter 17. The Search. Determined to prevent another catastrophe, we set out to find the relic. Armed with ancient maps and the historian's extensive knowledge, we ventured into the heart of the forest. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to close in around us, and the whispers returned, more insistent and malevolent than ever. After days of searching, we stumbled upon a hidden cave, its entrance obscured by thick undergrowth. Inside, the air was damp and cold, and the walls were covered in strange symbols. At the far end of the cave, we found a stone altar, and upon it lay the relic, a small, intricately carved idol that radiated a palpable sense of dread. Chapter 18. The Awakening. As we approached the altar, the whispers grew louder, filling the cave with a cacophony of voices. The historian warned me not to touch the idol, but it was too late. The moment my fingers brushed against it, a wave of darkness surged through the cave, and the ground trembled beneath our feet. The relic had awakened, and with it a new entity emerged. This one was far more powerful and malevolent than the previous guardian. Its form was a shifting mass of shadows, and its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. The historian and I barely escaped the cave as the entity unleashed its fury. Chapter 19. The Battle. Back at the cabin, we prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The historian had discovered a ritual that could seal the relic's power, but it required a great sacrifice. As we gathered the necessary ingredients, the entity's presence grew stronger, and the whispers became a constant, maddening drone. On the night of the ritual, the entity attacked with a ferocity we had never seen before. Shadows engulfed the cabin, and the temperature plummeted. The historian and I fought back with everything we had, chanting the ancient words and holding the relic at bay. Chapter 20. The Sacrifice. As the ritual reached its climax, the historian revealed the true nature of the sacrifice. One of us had to offer our life to seal the relic's power and banish the entity forever. Without hesitation, the historian stepped forward, his resolve unwavering. With a final, desperate chant, the historian completed the ritual. A blinding light filled the cabin, and the entity let out a final, anguished scream. The light faded and the oppressive energy lifted, leaving the cabin eerily silent once more. The historian lay motionless on the floor, his sacrifice ensuring the safety of the woods. Chapter 21. The Legacy. The relic was buried deep within the cave, sealed with powerful wards to prevent anyone from ever finding it again. The cabin remained abandoned, a silent reminder of the horrors that had transpired. I continued to guard the woods, honoring the historian's sacrifice and ensuring that no one else would fall victim to the darkness. The whispers had stopped, and the woods felt alive and vibrant once more. But even now, I can't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The woods are still there, and who knows what other dark secrets they hold. As I write this, I can hear the faintest whisper on the wind, a reminder that some things are never truly gone.